art history and advocacy. Please join me in giving a warm round of applause to welcome Ms. Bedian.
Thank you so much. Hi everyone. Wow, full auditorium. Very happy to see everyone here. Very happy to be here, and very grateful to be invited to be among so many fantastic Armenians in Burbank. So my first thing is, I don't know if anyone else recognizes this photo. This is a very famous photo from around the genocide. It's a black and white photo. I came across it like a long time ago, maybe 15 years ago, when I was at the Ararat home. They have a museum there for the Armenian Genocide. And that was the first time for me that I saw it. There was like a blown up framed photo of it. And I had an instant connection to this photo, and I had a lot of questions like, who are these women? What happened to them? What's their story? And also representing, two women holding what we call at the time Mardin, which is what the Fedais would hold, the rifles. And I always had a lot of questions, a strong connection. So I was so impressed. I took even like a selfie with it. This is a long time ago. And I kept this photo on my screen saver on my phone. I'm a descendant of genocide survivors from both sides of my parents. And also I was in the military. So a lot of people said, well, maybe you're connecting to it because, you were also in the army and these women are, soldiers and they have guns. And some people even said I looked a little bit like the lady, the one closest to my face. And so for a long time I always wondered who they were and what happened and how would you find out and what's their name and what's their story. So finally, after having this photo on my screensaver for like 10 years, an Armenian rock musician reached out to me because, sometimes when we're watching movies and TV stuff, as Armenians, we wait for the credits and we want to see if there's an IAN or a YAN, and we're like, oh my God, that person's Armenian. So that's kind of what happened with this musician, saw me on a TV show and went, oh my God, that girl's Armenian, and being both in the entertainment industry, sort of reached out for like a connection of requests. And as an Armenian, I usually, 10 out of 10, except any Armenian, I see the last name, I'm like, even if you do anything wrong, I probably know someone you know, so I'm not worried. So, and then the person told me that they were third generation Armenian, so they didn't actually read or write Armenian, but their Armenian speaking was kind of like very minimal, but that in Armenia, there's a show called Vinyl, and they do like documentary style biography on like famous stars outside of the diaspora. So he sent me a little clip, and one day when I had time and I was just scrolling, I said, let me watch that video from that TV show in Armenia. And this is what I saw.
Աշխարհի ամենահայտնի եւ հարգված երաժշտներից մեկի մասին եմ ուզում խոսել։ Մի մարդ, ով իր կարիերայի ընթացքում փորձել է իրենց տարբեր ոճերում, բայց մելոմանների համար նա միշտ մնում է երբեմն ռոք երաժիշտ։ Derek Sherinian, Dream Theater-ի որդիներից մեկը եւ Ապոլոնի որդիների հայրը։ 1966 թվականի օգոստոսի 25-ին ծնվում է Derek Sherinian։ Նրա հայրական արմատները սկսվում են Արևմտյան Հայաստանի Սեբաստիա քաղաքից։ Derek-ի նախատատը եւ իսապետ սուպեր պատմության մեջ հայտնի կին մարտիկներից է։ Հայոց ցեղասպան.
Okay, hello. So immediately I texted him and I was like, why are they showing that picture? And he said, that's my great grandmother. I know everything about her. I have the letters she's written. I have the family photos. I have everything. So then I was like, all right, well, I guess we need to go have dinner at some point and talk, which is what we did. And I was introduced to everything that happened to this woman and how Derek Sherinian got to be her great-grandson here in LA. Now, these are letters written from that woman, but she was illiterate at the time. She had to pay someone to write for her word for word in English and Armenian. And so these are, if you see here, so basically the story turns out they were trying to escape. At the time when they were escaping, Elizabeth, had a husband and a child named Mariam. And at the time when they were trying to board the ship, they had what they called at the time something like eye sore or something. And it was like an infectious eye contamination thing that was going on. So they didn't allow her and her husband to board, but her husband's brother was there, so her uncle or whatever, and they said, give me Mariam, I can take her to safety to the US, and then I'll get you visas once you guys are healed, or whatever. That kind of never happened. There was other plans for Mariam was brought to Boston, and she got adopted by a very wealthy Armenian family called the Manugians, who adopted her and basically said, hey, if one day somebody comes and tells you that like you're not ours, don't listen to them, it's not true, you're our child. So Mariam grew up for a long time not knowing anything about her, and then later we find out that this woman found out that she was lied to, she never got visas, she could never find her child, she spent years looking for her, she spent everything she had, she was very miserable. Her husband died, I think it was during the sacking in 1922, even after the genocide. And she spent her whole life looking for Mariam and didn't find her for a very long time. Meanwhile, Mariam grew up and got married to a man named Derek Sherinian, and they had a son named George Jr., and George Jr. had a son named Derek. This is the continuation of the letter, one of the letters where she's trying to reach out to Mariam, because she did eventually find Mariam, but Mariam was very upset, and Mariam didn't want to believe the story initially, and kind of thought, if you love me so much, why did you just give up on me? Why did you just let me go? And it's hard for a child, or even I guess early adult, to understand that it was in the best interest of the child, but the child always feel like they were abandoned, right? So the mother is letters after heartbreaking letters saying, hurt for you, how I'm miserable without you. She's saying here, a civil war broke out in Turkey in 1922, and all the Christians were mercilessly massacred. We had the good luck to flee to Greece. I mean, even after the genocide, they still went through so much, and they finally were able to flee. So she had a very difficult life, and she did end up remarrying. And every child she had was a variation of the name Mariam. And if her brother had a child who was a daughter, they named them Mariam. That one Mariam that got away that nobody had met was a big, heartbreaking journey for this woman. But then in this letter, she talks about how she tried to find, how the uncle forbade her from coming because she was not told that, I gave you a child for adoption. The child's adopted, is settled in the family, leave it alone, move on. Instead, the church and the US officials were told that the child's parents were deceased, which was in fact a lie. Let's go to the next one. This is actually the actual certificate of how the Manugian, John Manugian and whatever, adopted Mariam. And if you look here, it says, it appearing that the parents of said child are deceased. So that was a lie, and that's how they got the adoption through and passed off Mariam as an orphan from the genocide. This is the Manugians, the wealthy family from Boston. They were unable to have children, so they had adopted already one boy, this boy behind them, and their plan was to adopt a girl. And then, weird story, I can't confirm if it's true, but apparently they wanted them to get married to leave the money in the family, since they were really not biologically, connected or brother or sister. That was their plan. Well, Mariam didn't follow that plan. This is a letter in Armenian. Again, Elizabeth was illiterate. She found a neighbor who had moved to Yerevan from Egypt. And even in some of the letters, it says, this man is promising that he's writing every word for a word that I say. And the man is writing everything that she's saying exactly like that. If you look there, she says, Shad lav imatsek vor yes shad em zeratsel u hopnel. Im miag երջանկության է ծեր նկարները ունենալ, ծեր բարի լուրերը ստանալ եւ ուրախանալ. This woman longed for her child, and it was very sad. There's pages and pages. This is just 2 pages of one 12-page letter. We have all the archives, the original one, but what's also most interesting is when you see that this is not like, she's actually talking about massacres, about Armenians being massacred. This is not like some newspaper reporting it that we could say, oh, they were paid to or whatever. This is a woman talking about the accounts that are happening to her personally in her life. She's attesting to the fact that they were being massacred. This is one of the letters that Derek, because he can't read Armenian, had a translator translate the letters and show what the mother is saying, trying to find her. At one point, they started communicating via email letters, writing back and forth, but Mariam was kind of hesitant because she really didn't trust all this stuff that was happening and being told to her. She didn't know the depth of what had happened. But the mother is also, still hoping, still sending information. You see what the letters are dated 1956. So that's Mariam after she grew up. And that's George Sr. that she married. And then they had a son named George Jr., who ended up coming out to California to pursue his legal studies. And then when he got married, they had Derek. That's basically the story. So that's Derek with a picture of his great-grandmother. Now the story behind this is Derek always posts every April 24 a picture of the black and white photo on his Facebook to commemorate the genocide and to, tell everybody about who his great-grandmother was. And so one day on Facebook, he got a message saying, from Armenia, from Yerevan, people started writing to him, a few ladies, and said, "Excuse me, why are you posting a picture of our grandmother?" And he was like, "No, I'm posting a picture of my great-grandmother." And they were like, "No, you're posting a picture of our grandmother." So they started going back and forth. Turns out, Mariam got remarried. Remember I told you, and she had other. And so the connection was made with that that second family in Armenia. And so Derek right away wanted to find out, well, where is Elizabeth? What happened to her? I mean, we know she's passed away, but where is she buried? And they told her that she was buried, she had passed away in Russia, very, I guess, not well, and very depressed. They relocated her grave to Armenia and took it to Yerevan. And at this point, Derek's father, George Jr., had passed away, never knowing what happened to Elizabeth, where her body is, what happened. But we did have his ashes. So Derek flew to Armenia and took his father's ashes and laid them beside the famous Elizabeth Sultanian. And this is a photo taken on that day when he finally found his great-grandmother's gravesite in Yerevan. And so on that famous evening where I went out for sushi with Derek, was our first and last date because we were together ever since.
Please give a big round of applause to Aunt Bedian. Thank you so much for being here.